Welcome everyone to the Personal Rescue Podcast. With me, I have Dr. Margaret Gavian with Blue Peak, and I'm Lee Vernon with the Holistic Wellness Center. And welcome. Today, we're going to cover coping strategies for first responders and how sometimes we don't sometimes choose the best coping management skills on how to deal with things. And so we're going to go into some things on topics of like positive coping, negative coping skills, things we can do to improve. Sometimes what brings that on. Unbeknownst to us, sometimes we get in a rut and we don't even realize we're coping with something in maybe not the best manner because we're all wrapped up in life's stress and daily things that go on. So today we're going to kind of dive into that because the coping is something that's kind of a catalyst of it can lead down some bad pathways when it comes to dealing with stress, and especially with the holidays coming around, we wanted to kind of dive into this topic and subject. So thank you for being here with me again
Yeah,
today, Margaret.
my pleasure. This is one of my favorite topics because it's a lifelong learning of how we deal with stress. And everybody's got their own ways, even if they think they don't have ways, they have them. Some are good and some are not so good. So,
Yeah,
yeah, we're going to
and
dive right
so and
in.
I'm sure we're all guilty at one point and another. We try to do our best, but we after going through this, we'll probably realize like, oh my God, I do that too on occasion, and that's okay. It's just we don't want it to be a habit. So, well, let's talk about why do we fall into bad habits when we're stressed. Let's get into that and start there.
Yeah, well, if you've ever kind of noticed yourself getting home from a shift or work or just going about your day, and you might have maybe you stayed up really late binging Netflix, right? That I know that sometimes I fall into that trap, or you find yourself yelling at the dishwasher or about something silly, right? It's not really about the dishwasher, or you're grabbing a beer, right? Or you're um, reaching for sugary food, right? This is all the kind of coping that a lot of us do. And we're human, right? None of us are perfect. We're not trying to be these perfect people, perfect, healthy people all the time. But it's so easy to fall into bad habits because of the busyness that I think so many first responders are subject to, right? There's long shifts if you're full time, right? Really long shifts that are usually fairly busy. And even if they're not busy, there's the way of life at the firehouse that often doesn't leave a lot of room for personal habits, right? There's kind of that adrenaline dump, right? So okay, we're sitting down to eat lunch and now we're going on a call, now we haven't eaten for a few hours, so that, and then also just kind of the constant, you never know what's coming, we got to quick do problem solving. There's just a lot of up down, like literally getting up and stopping the rhythm of the day, and that's what makes the job fun, right? You never know what you're going to
Yep.
get. There's always something new around the corner. You might be sitting and watching TV for a little while and then have to jump into action at the drop of a hat. But it gets really hard to keep energy consistent in that part. And it's hard to have a routine for healthy habits when you have all of that kind of, spiking stress levels. And most people don't even really acknowledge it as stress anymore on the job. So oftentimes we just default to what's comfortable. We default to what's easy, which might just be sitting down and scrolling on our phone. So yeah, and or resort to what's comforting, right, in the moment. Like, oh, I'm just gonna eat this food because that'll make me feel better. Right? So that's
Yep.
it's not always easy to start changing habits, or even first of all standing on the sidelines of our own life and looking at what our habits actually are.
Yeah, and I can tell you from the data and research and living that lifestyle at the station, even when we're not on a call, you're just at the station and it's quiet time, you're still in a state of arousal because you're
100%.
waiting, you're anticipating that tone to drop. And so you're always, when you measure like I call baseline vitals of just your heart rate and respiratory rate, a lot of times they're going to be slightly elevated, unbeknownst to us, because our
Mhm.
body adapts to that process. But when you
Yeah,
take
most people
it,
don't feel that, right? They don't notice
no,
it anymore.
but
Yeah.
even just the, your heart rate's elevated maybe 10 points, respiratory maybe an extra 2 or 3 or 4 minute. Again, you're in a state of fight or flight because you know at any second that tone drops. So totally get it on that aspect. And yeah, you just become kind of numb or to the fact that you're in that arousal, but that's definitely not something that you want to stay in. So get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a really good point. And it's a conversation I have a lot with the people that I support. I mean, I was in a station yesterday and somebody pulled me aside and we were having a private one on one. And he was asking, why am I getting these kind of pangs of what he was calling intrusive, not thoughts, but like kind of like like intrusive anxiety out of
Yeah.
nowhere when he was thinking about something he had done that he didn't really feel that great about. Nothing really bad, but he's like, oh, I said something stupid in that conversation, or I wish I hadn't said that. But those kind of thoughts were following him throughout his day. And even though it was something that had been resolved, it actually wasn't that big of a deal. And he intellectually knew that. He was saying, why am I getting these like pangs of panic when I think about that thing which is resolved and it's not even a big deal? Right. And through the course of our conversation, and this is, I think, what happens for a lot of first responders, this is an example of it. I don't think this kind of thought patterns are always happening, but basically, we did a little deeper dive on what's going on and exactly what you're talking about. What come to find out, he's idling high, right? So he has kind of a baseline higher revved state. And
Hmm.
so then when he accidentally spouted off at one of his coworkers or said something he thought was maybe a dumb thing to say in front of command staff, he was beating himself up for it and having these kind of panicky feelings, right? But it's
Yeah.
really that he was idling high and then these kind of little spurts of anxiety were kind of, if I had the image of a volcano really, and he didn't know what to do about how do I deal with the lava splurting out of the volcano, when really the conversation is how do we help your body come back down so that we have less of those volcano eruptions and cope better in general, right? Instead of
Hmm.
yelling at somebody or losing your cool. Sometimes that happens at home, right? We've talked about that. We will be
Oh,
talking about
yes.
that around anger that shows up so frequently, or in road rage, or yelling at the family, right? That's one of those kind of ineffective habits that I think people often notice. So really, it was about part of coping is doing, and we all know fire prevention, right, is working on preventing those sort of things from happening. And we're all going to misstep and we're all going to make mistakes and say dumb things or get angry. That's human. But how do we cope with that kind of baseline higher stress level that many first responders are walking around with? Or it's just pent up in a way,
Yeah. Yeah. And
kind
that
of
leads
waiting
right
for the
into,
next thing to poke it, right?
right. And, that leads right into why you were talking earlier, some of the coping, negative coping of yelling at things, binge watching, we're going for bad foods or alcohol, isolation. Why does that not work long term? Why is that not effective long term wise on
Oh, why? So why does Netflix not work long term?
that?
Like Netflix is a great coping strategy, and sometimes we joke about like I just need to watch. And I know for me, sometimes in a busy life, I want to take a mental break. So I want to watch some show that takes me completely out of my life, um, and it works sort of sometimes, right? So,
Hmm.
but it's not always the healthiest habit. Um, well, first of all, if you're using anger blowups as your coping, right, just because you've got to vent, and I think a lot of people think that, like, I have to vent because this is how I feel. So I've got to tell that person what I think. And I'm just a truth teller and they need to know, right? We start damaging relationships around us or our professional reputation, or people start walking on eggshells, right? Those things don't work. Also, it's not a pleasant experience to be the person who's always feeling hostile or angry, right? And honestly, it's indicative of physiologically the body under stress, a nervous system that's jacked. I know if you listen to this podcast, you're going to hear me talk about that on repeat. But if you're reaching for the food, right, you're going to reach, usually our coping foods are, I want to reach for gummy bears. Other people want to reach for chips or burgers and fries, right? Or things that aren't, that help change our brain chemistry and bring us
Hmm.
comfort in that moment, but actually aren't healthy in the long term. Um, so there's a lot of things I could say about this topic, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add in here, Lee.
Well, yeah, I can totally agree. There's many of us that, it's weird when we're amongst our peers. It's kind of just I don't know, it's unspoken, but we don't necessarily, when somebody pops off and is venting, we kind of we understand why. So, especially if you're with a really close knit group of guys that you work with and you know each other, you get it. You typically it's not taken personal. Yet those same actions in the civilian world, people look at you and go, "You're an asshole," and it's
Yeah.
just like, but you don't understand why. And so sometimes, we're our own worst enemy of, well, we do it at work. Nobody gets mad. They understand. But then when we get home or out amongst civilian friends and do that, people look at us vastly different because they don't understand. So I think that's a quandrum too that we have to face is there's one way to act amongst your peers and people you're with, and we act vastly different at the station than we do, at home or out in the public, but it's just a different environment, and we can get away with, I think, more not appropriate behavior when you're at the station amongst the guys and the gals, and
Right, like there's
that's
dark
how we are.
humor, right? Like I've been asked, is the dark humor that you often hear from first responders, is that good coping or is that bad? Should we stop doing that? Should we stop making inappropriate jokes about maybe some of the community members we bump into in our job? And I don't know what you think about that. I don't think it's quote unquote bad, right? We
Yeah.
need laughter. Like laughter is a good
Oh yeah.
antidote. Um, Physiologically it's a good antidote, right? There's things
Yep.
like laughter yoga, for Pete's sake, right? We can fake laugh right now and it would be sort of funny if we started doing it, but you can produce the same chemicals of real laughter, the feel good things that happen in your body when you actually laugh, by fake laughing. That's a little weird, but uh, it's kind of funny. But so the dark humor, I think, is a great, it's not a bad coping strategy. It's normal. And then sometimes we got to watch it, right?
It has to be, yeah.
It,
No, I
and it has
agree.
to
I think
be
some of it is,
sensitive. And I know
yes,
even at times when I was burnt out from working with very intense, emotionally intense clients, mostly when I was working in a psychiatric program, I noticed some of that dark humor starting to come out, and it was a red flag to me that something was off balance.
Mhm.
That, yeah, it's good to laugh with coworkers and to make light of really heavy situations sometimes, just as a way of getting through. But it also was a red flag that's like, okay, you may be starting to head down the road of feeling of being a little burnt out if you're starting
Yeah.
to joke about these people that you actually care about,
Mhm.
and that are going through really tragic, hard times. So,
I
yeah,
think it's the brain and body's way of also protecting itself
yes,
of seeing horrific trauma. It's how it protects itself. And, for us, we find that, yes, we were very receptive to there is a place and time for that. When we're working and doing things, and there's people around. Because nowadays, man, let me tell you, when I started 30 years ago, Didn't worry about cell phones recording and stuff like that.
Or body cam
By
recording.
all that. And
Yeah,
so, there was a different time and place. And as throughout the career, all that came about. Well, now you're on camera, somebody's recording you, and it's vastly different. So it morphed into different areas of where we could cope and kind of bring that dark humor in. I have seen it done in an unprofessional way
yeah,
in front of family, and that was not cool. And that individual did, when it was brought to their attention, it was he admitted he's like, I am burned smooth out, and so at least some corrective measures were taken from there. But yes, it can really damage the image of first responders when done
100%.
inappropriately, and people will hear stuff that they shouldn't because they don't understand. It's like, hey, we're just trying to get through this as much as possible. And sometimes it's like, yeah, this is the third time I've had to deal with a fatality in the 24-hour shift. So, yeah, that starts weighing on the mind and body, and we're just trying to get through it so we can perform to the highest, level of we're capable of.
Yeah,
And
and
people don't understand that.
the thing about coping, whether they're healthy coping mechanisms or not healthy, is that, and a way I always approach it is thinking about people are naturally inclined to reach for something to feel better, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
a beer, whether it's a candy bar, whether it's an inappropriate joke, um, right? People's natural inclination is for a reach, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's maybe exercise, and all the things that could fall under the column of addiction. Those are all reaches for feeling better, right? They're not bad, right? People think, why
Mhm.
can't I manage my alcohol? What's wrong with me? I'm weak, right? No, it's just you're reaching for feeling better. And let's talk about what's inspiring the reach, and what needs to be cared for and how we cope with that feeling that's kind of underlying what's going on, not shame and damn the reach in itself. So yes, for example, using humor, yes, okay, know your time and place. Don't say inappropriate things in public with the community. You're in public safety. You do have a public profile that needs to be maintained. But the reach for laughter is actually a genuine and good reach. Let's just try to make healthy reaches, right?
Right.
And people reach for all sorts of things. They also reach for loved ones, right? Of talking to good friends. And some actually, when one of the things I think a lot about is something a chief, that I know said that I found really profound. And he said, when things got tough for me, and he had worked multiple child fatalities and really tragic calls, in which some one or two of those kids reminded him of things that had happened to his own grandchildren. So it was very personally triggering. He said, my addiction wasn't food. My addiction wasn't to substances. My addiction was to silence and to withdraw. And that's how I knew something was off. And many people, he's not the only person I've talked to that will talk about avoidance and pulling back as their primary coping. I just get quiet. My wife is spouting off or saying all these things or telling me that something's not right, with me, or I'm not doing XYZ, or I don't want to engage in the bad blowing up behaviors with my family, or I don't actually know what to say, and I have so much pent up things. I'm just going to quiet down and shut down and retreat to the garage, for example, right? So a lot of the times the negative coping can look like isolation, which just really piles on shame on top
Yeah.
of that. And it actually makes me tearful thinking about the pain that people feel because they have so much emotion, don't know what to do with it, and then just hole up and are trying to lick their wounds by themselves with the good and pure intention of not wanting to hurt other people or taking it out on other people, but really that snowballs into depression, which then can snowball into feeling like it would be easier if I wasn't around, or I'm a burden. Maybe I would be better off dead, right? And isolating, and those are the kind of the extreme situations, but even isolating from your crew, from your coworkers, from your
Hmm.
family, in which people miss you, right? So that's another kind of one of those uh, not so great coping
Yeah.
strategies.
Yeah, I can. It was interesting. I think we battle multiple fronts. You have the initial ugliness of trauma and ugliness of humanity that we get exposed to. So you have to fight that. Then you fight the other, or at least with me, I fought the other aspect of, we're trained to save. That's what we do, is to save lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you run so many calls like cardiac arrests and just other traffic accidents, with fatalities, just you name it, trauma where there's a fatality involved, and we're not successful in saving that life. There's a lot of us, or at least I'll speak for me. I took that as a personal deal of like, I was not successful in my job and my skills to preserve the life I'm supposed to save and I'm
Mm-hmm.
responsible for. So we
Mm-hmm.
fight, I think, multiple quandaries too of issues of not just the ugliness of trauma that nobody should have to be exposed to and see, but's there, but also the aspect of when you take your job, that's what we're here for. That's what I want to do. When you don't succeed at that, there is a portion of, or at least with me, a little bit of guilt of failure. It's like I failed.
Yeah.
Um, that weighs with you, especially with children to, the elderly and everything in between. And I thought it was really interesting. I battled that. I think I battled the failure part unbeknownst to me. It was something that ate at me for a long time. And it wasn't until I met with somebody in a spiritual um, therapy types session where we kind of dove into the spirituality and looking at other things outside of that, and what brought, and this is to me made probably the biggest, and I want to say it out because to me it brought me this automatic peace. And the piece was, she said, you're worried, or you're thought about all the ones that you didn't save. And she said, we're in this country, this is the only country that really doesn't embrace death and going on to that next
Mm.
dimension of whatever you believe in. And she goes, every other country and other parts of the world, there's a sacred person for that transition of leaving this life and going to the next. And they're usually like a medicine man, a shaman, something of that nature. And she goes, here in America, we don't support that or look at that or even, review it for what we do. And she goes, you know what? You're chosen. That was why you're here. You are that special individual for the ones that you didn't save, that you have the gift to be with that individual at that time to help them go on to that next life.
Yeah.
That
Maybe you're
that's a
holding
very
them, right? Maybe you're just right there holding
yeah,
them.
and she goes,
Yeah.
that should be embraced because everywhere else in the world, that individual that's there at a time of passing is revered and looked upon in the highest and most positive aspects of life. And she goes, that was your job. That was your calling of, yes, you're here to save and make a difference, but you can also make a difference in that transition period of moving to the next life.
Well,
And when she said
that's
that,
incredibly. I mean, that
and
gives me goosebumps
yeah,
because
and
you
after
guys are
she,
not trained in how to handle death, right? It's like
no,
avoid, 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 save, save, save. And if you had had that kind of insight at the beginning, how much suffering that might have alleviated when,
I
of
mean,
course, people
yeah,
are
it
going to
was
die in your
huge.
arms. Yeah.
Yeah, now, on the private side, I deal with palliative end of life care for first responders, and people go, "Oh my God, is that tough?" I'm like, "Oh, it's still mentally tough, but there is now I embrace that journey, and can take comfort in knowing that I was chosen to be a part of their journey." And to me, that's very gratifying, immensely holistic and gratifying on the level of like, I was chosen. Now it's not me responding and I don't have a choice in it, but now people come to me and go, "Hey, I want you to be a part of this." And so to me, that brings an immense amount of comfort, not only to myself, but to the family, to the individuals, to guide them through that
Yeah.
process.
And that's a
It,
whole training and a whole kind of growing industry now is what I know it as is death doula, right? Hospice work is amazing.
yeah,
And I know we're a little sideways from our
yeah, yeah.
coping talk, but I think this is super fascinating. Right? People are trained as death doulas. We have doulas and people that specialize in birth, which is bringing a new life into the world. And what about on the tail end of helping a person exit gracefully or at least with some care, right? In not a
Yeah.
very frenetic, we're trying to save you kind of
Yeah.
way.
So
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think most first responders, when in those conversations that you are let into those private moments of watching or being with someone as they're dying, looking into their eyes or having patients look up to you and say, am I going to make it? Am I dying? Right? Those kinds of very tender moments and intense moments are what stick and sometimes don't stick so well,
Yep.
right? Because you guys are trained to fix, right? And the same is true with coping, right? It's like, well, I'm doing this thing. How do I fix it? Like sometimes there's no easy fix. It's we've
Mhm.
got to find a different way of being rather than to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
Rather than to do the CPR, we've got to, you know, be with that person as we see that they're not going to make it.
Yep. No. So I mean, yeah, we got off onto the rabbit hole side stitch, but I think it
Maybe
works
we should do a
jointly
whole
of,
other discussion around death, but
well, we're talking, it's because that's a lot of our coping mechanisms revolves around that, unfortunately. So, hopefully providing that as a something for somebody to explore. How does that tie in? Well, hey, if I have a better understanding of maybe where my journey and my path within a profession lies, that does a whole lot to now. If I have an understanding of things, I'm not going to necessarily dive off into poor coping habits and poor choices on coping. I have a better understanding of that.
or
So,
beating yourself up for the people that that did die,
yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely. So let's talk about some positive coping. What are some good coping
whoa,
skills? If somebody is that, again, the holidays are coming up. So I look at, aside from the ugliness of the profession, now you got to throw in family, the stress of the holidays, everything from emotional stress because there's maybe family members that you don't get along with, or there's fighting amongst
no, none of us
families.
have those. Yeah.
Yeah, being tore apart, working, missing those
Yeah.
family holidays because you're on call or at the station working. So, let's talk about, that's an added stress of what are some positive coping mechanisms we could integrate into just day to day, and some things that would help with the holidays too.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely switching gears. I'm kind of caught. I'm
Yeah.
feeling a little. I'm a little. I'm a little stuck. So, mostly because I was having a conversation. I'm traveling back a little bit with a busy urban fire department recently, and one of the medics I was talking to said that his first day of the job, his partner said, "Welcome. Prepare to lose your soul." Right. So
Oh, gee,
that's
thanks.
yeah, like, oh, this is my first job and I'm all excited and it's my not my first job, my first day on the job and I've made it to the big time and now I got to prepare to lose my soul. What? So, when we think about coping, we actually have to think about how to protect your soul.
Mhm.
And in the holidays is can just be really a lot more intense, right? So to break it down, kind of because I'm a practical person, we can get stuck in this death and soul and whole process quite a bit, but it is very practical and it is about setting good habits and really thinking about it from a prevention standpoint,
Mhm.
right? We're not going to wait till shit's hitting the fan. We're not going to wait till we're overwhelmed and exhausted, which is kind of the baseline of most first responders I talk to is like just go, 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 say yes to all the things. I can do that. I can take care of it. I'm everybody's rock. I can help my faith community. I can help my neighbors hang their lights. I can do something for my in-laws, and then I'm going to pick up that extra shift for my coworker because they've got, you know, a new baby or something going on, right? So one of the things is learning that saying no is good.
Yes.
Which is a really hard programming to reverse. And it's something I talk about all the time. And when people say, hey, I dropped my side gig, or hey, I cut down from 3 side gigs to only 1, or hey, I got myself off of that extra committee, I cheer, because that's really the kind of thing that people should move towards. So many firefighters in particular, well, maybe they have a full-time fire job, then they've got a paid on call fire job, and then they teach over here on the side, and then they do a lawn or landscaping business in their off time, and then they're coaching their kids' team. And I'm like, when on earth do you have time to just be you, to have actual downtime, right? And sooner or later, those things catch up. So good strategies are things like, figure out what you can say no to. And most people say, I can't, not this year. Well, but my wife or this person's depending on me. But really good self-care, good coping, you have to put yourself first, which is also not in your programming. Right? Because
No.
it's about service, it's about doing for others. And often you guys are last on your own list of priorities, but learning to what you can say no to is really important. And part of that often requires having conversations with people that you're closest to, like spouses, family members, and really being honest that you don't have to take care of everyone and everything. I know it feels good. It's well intentioned. It's a beautiful sentiment. This is why I love working with first responders so much, is because they're so generous and they're hurting at their own expense, right? So learning what you can say no to, right? And sometimes figuring out with your family members how to strategize that and do that well, rather than disappear on people, or rather than people being like, why are you saying no to all these things, just to be honest about them. So that's one go-to strategy, holidays or not. You don't have to do all the things. Please don't
Right.
do all the things. One of the best coping strategies is having downtime. Now, I know that's not always a very comfortable thing for responders, is sitting idle, right? We want to
No.
keep moving, and I have ADHD and I got to keep engaged, and
Yes.
I got to stay on the move, and I don't want to sit down. But I think I don't like using bad coping. I know in my world we'd call it maladaptive coping. That's kind of also a mouthful. But sometimes staying too busy is a way of avoiding what
Yes.
we really might feel, right? If I just keep moving, I don't have to think about that child who I just held as they died. Now, that's a dramatic example. But if I just keep moving, I don't have to notice that actually I don't feel good, or my body has pain, or I have to deal with my conflict going on with my spouse, right? If I just keep moving and I'll do all the things, and I'll do the yard work and the house chores and running the kids around, or all the animal care, or helping with that committee, then I don't actually have time to notice what's happening inside of me. And good coping is actually calling for a timeout, and start small, right? 5 minutes in the morning of just some quiet downtime. Now, ideally, that time would be spent very intentionally, like meditating or prayer, if that is something that
Hmm.
works for you, or journaling, or just sitting with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at a beautiful tree. Having that kind of nervous system physiological reset um, is a really, really positive coping. The way we start our day, if we start our day with the alarm blaring, we jump up, we grab, 30 ounces of coffee, and we shove a bagel in our mouth, and we get in the car, we're already amped, right? and then someone
Yeah.
cuts us off in traffic, and then then we're pissed off, and then we get to work and something else goes awry, right? It's just we start our day already frenetic. So the way we start our day is really important.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't realize it takes the brain about an hour to go from the sleep state, which are chemical compounds and makeup for rest, vastly different than when we're up and going throughout the day. And so it takes about that hour for the brain to transition fully from sleep state to, awake state and being able to perform. So I think, yeah, most people, when you just rush, 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 you're never allowing the brain to switch over. And so you're starting again, right out, that alarm goes off, fight or flight, unbeknownst to people. And, I think that first 30 to 60 minutes of the day is incredibly important for the brain in that transition period so we can be, mentally where we need to be to perform.
And easy for us to say, right? Our kids are older, right? They can get
Hmm.
themselves out of bed. They're not babies crying from the crib that need
Hmm.
immediate tending, right?
Yeah.
So for younger parents, right? And I understand that gets a lot more complicated. You've got, I mean, I remember when my kids were little, right? They were sometimes as a toddler at my bedside at 4:45, like they were the alarm clock. There wasn't really 5 minutes in that moment to grab to do
Right.
meditation or prayer or to have my quiet cup of tea,
Yeah.
right? But so even if you do have to get up, get the kids and everybody ready and have some sort of a busy initial part of your morning, where can you slow down? So if I have a morning like that, I'm not going to then move forward in my workday until I've got my 5-10 minutes. Now, I've worked up to having longer than 5 or 10 minutes because
Yeah.
it feels good. And I notice the quality of the whole rest of my day changes if I put in those first few minutes of intentional downtime in the beginning of the day. Now, that might be stretching, right, for
Yeah.
some people. It might be yoga. It might be getting a good workout in. It might be taking the dog for a walk and getting and starting to move your body, right? 5 or 10 minutes of that. Sometimes people think, oh, what I need an hour and a half to go to the gym.
No.
No, yes, ideally, right, if we want to work on our muscles
Right.
and get the good circuit training in, yes, yes, yes. But to start your day and to get these start getting some good coping strategies in, you want to think about mini breaks. We're not trying
Yeah.
to do an overhaul of someone's life. We want to say, okay, maybe it's you in the bathroom first thing in the morning and you just take a few deep breaths,
Hmm.
right? That's your alone time. I talk a lot about what people do in the bathroom,
Yeah.
not because I'm interested in bathroom behavior, but because those are a few quiet moments you have,
Yeah.
right? Could you put on some music that helps you feel centered as you're getting ready? There are these
Yeah.
like little mini tweaks
Yeah.
that I think can
I'm a
be
big
super,
proponent
super.
of the cold plunge or a cold shower for
Yeah,
2 to 3 minutes is huge to me, and that again doesn't take a lot of time, but getting some good endorphins flowing in the body and the brain, and it's 2 to 3 minutes. And while you're in there, you're mentally trying to focus on breathing. So to me, I love those cold therapy options
yeah.
because you're actually encompassing several things in there at once, and it takes 3 minutes, and then you're done.
Yeah, so if you're taking a shower, get the most out of that shower, milk it, right? Cold showers
Yeah.
don't always feel good, but actually there's so much science behind cold plunging and building resilience through being able to tolerate that cold. And you could probably speak more to the benefits as well, but like you're standing there and you actually have to breathe to be able to tolerate that
Yes.
that temperature, right? Whether it's a cold plunge or you're just get a cold shower in, it
Right.
requires you to focus and to feel and to really get some deep breaths in so you don't yell. That's me.
Yes.
I'm like a yeller in those cold plunges, but um yeah, that's a great idea.
So yeah, and then I think too, if you can give your body the first thing in the morning to help that transition while you're doing it, first thing, get some water. Get some water flowing in the body because you've been asleep for 6, 8 hours. You're already dehydrated. So instead of taking a stimulant like coffee or an energy drink, which would further dehydrate and irritate the body and mind as a whole, take that first glass of water, a little bit of Celtic sea salt or Himalayan salt for electrolytes, drink that. And if you can wait that 10-15 minutes, go get ready, choose your method of quiet time, whether it be the bathroom, whatever. And then when you're done with all that, then get your coffee. Now you've allowed your body to hydrate, and you've given a little bit of time, even if it's all you got is 10-15 minutes of your mind waking up before we start that stimulation process through a chemical. Caffeine's great, but at the same time, I want to allow my body to adjust. And so I think that's too, when they go straight from waking up, give me that stimulus right off the bat. That can be sometimes detrimental and things too. So I think incorporating not only that quiet time and downtime in the morning, 5 minutes, give your body the proper, I guess, go mechanism to start the day, and that's hydrate. Hydrate first, and then allow yourself to take that coffee, tea, or whatever your choice is on that. I think is important too, because
But your choice
stimulant,
is not an
we're
energy drink.
stimulating
You're
things,
not
and we're already
choosing an energy
stimulated.
drink. Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't. I'm against them, but otherwise, coffee, tea, water, it's like pretty basic on that. But you do have to be careful because if you're in that fight or flight, now I'm adding a stimulant on top of that. That's just going to increase things in a negative manner for irritability and being able to cope with stuff throughout the day too. So,
Hmm.
I think it's a multifaceted process when we
Yeah.
talk about uh, that morning wake up. And I'm big like you. I believe I have my morning ritual. And when I'm home, I do it and it's huge and it doesn't take long. When I'm on the road and I'm traveling, speaking, or teaching, I I either have to get up earlier to do the same, but I usually just get up 15 minutes early and just do a condensed version of that and go on my day. But definitely notice the difference of home with my normal ritual versus being on the road. So there's a process. I'm with you on the ritual side of
Yeah.
finding your
Yeah. So
process.
I know I call it my sacred start, right? How I'm going to start my every day. And there, I do a lot of mental health check-ins with a lot of firefighters. And one of the things I learned early on, and which I'll always ask, because many people are doing well, and ask, what are you doing? What are the routines that you're doing that keep you doing well? People that are not suffering. And one paid on call firefighter said, he said, every morning I sit on the porch with my wife and we share a cup of coffee, right? And that
Mhm.
is our morning ritual. And the days I don't get to do that are the days I know are not going to be my good days. And it's small, right?
Yeah.
Now it is a luxury, right? Many of us are moving
Yeah.
in all sorts of directions with kids and jobs, and right, that's not always available to us, but it was something that simple, that was just that this was our point of connection. We made time to do it every day. And yes, it's coffee, but it was really about the connection,
Yeah.
right? And connection is a healthy coping
Yeah.
strategy, right? Here's my person. We are having some quality time, even if it's 5 minutes, just sitting here saying, here we are, we're both here enjoying this cup of coffee. Now let's start our day.
Yep. And I think you were on that slowing down process of somebody had said years ago, I'd heard, I guess actually when I went through therapy, the therapist was, if you can't take care of yourself, you sure as hell can't take care of everybody else. And so finding that downtime to take care of yourself, like you had mentioned earlier, it's not selfish. It's mandatory. It's
Mm-hmm.
needed in order, if we're going to take on those responsibilities and that burden that comes with the profession, we have to take care of ourselves, or we're not going to be at full capacity to take care of others. And I think one way that connection, what I like to talk about, whether it's a connection of with a spouse in the morning or just sitting and looking out a window, watching the sunrise or trees, animals, whatever. It's, I think, something that's missed that we don't ever think about is really what we need to be doing during that time frame. Or another way to think of this is finding gratitude. Finding gratitude in the good things in your life to start the day. And that should be a part of that little ritual and your wake up processes every day. Try to find gratitude. When I'm on the road teaching, yeah, I get it. My normal routine is with my wife every morning. We just sit and have coffee together. That's our time. The kids are asleep, no work. It's just us. And then when I'm on the road, I don't have it. So I have to find some gratitude somewhere. My gratitude is like, hey, today I'm going to actually go and make a difference in people's lives. We're going to teach them to be better at saving lives. And by the way, oh gee, today I'm in Montana, so I can look out at the mountains, or I'm down in Florida and there's a beach, or it's not hard to find gratitude, but we have to mentally do that on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And I think finding that gratitude is important with that process of coping.
I'm
It is a way
so
of
glad you
coping.
brought gratitude up. I have a lot to say about gratitude.
Take it away then.
Part of my dissertation was actually on gratitude and relaxation. So gratitude, because I know people often are like start to roll their eyes and are like, oh God, now I got to be grateful. And it's this airy fairy, like froofy stuff that we're going to see on a magazine in the grocery checkout line. But actually, gratitude is an evidence-based strategy, right? It's been proven time and time again that if we practice gratitude, if we practice noticing the things we're grateful for, I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing, like, oh, I'm grateful even though my marriage is falling apart. Like, I'm not talking about skipping over
Right.
the bad stuff that might be actually occurring, but because we still got to be present with that, right? We still got to
Right.
be present to whatever we have going on, tragedy, depression, family drama, whatever that is. But if we can find things to be grateful for, I woke up today. My body is breathing
Yeah.
all on its own. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be, I'm grateful for this amazing life. It can be very small. Like, I can walk,
Yes.
right? Like, my bed is warm, right? I have heat, and I live in Minnesota, right? So that's something I'm grateful for. I have safety. My children are healthy. Right, finding small things like my dog loves me, right? It doesn't
Right.
have to be like I'm grateful for this warm cup of coffee, right? It does not need to be some sensational, I'm so grateful I've got the most awesome truck and the best house on the block and the best partner. No, it's small things. And actually, if you practice doing it's called three good things. Usually if you do that before bed, and just if you write them down, it's even better, a little gratitude journal, but three good things that happened that day, you start rewiring. Now here's the science part of it, your neural connections, and changing the brain to notice more things that are you can be grateful for, or to notice more good things. We all know the downward spiral that we can sometimes get on, like the black cloud I hear about
Yep.
in the firefighting
Yep.
world. Well, it's a bad day, and now it's this also happened, and this happened, and this happened, and now it's just a shitty day, and this is how this day goes. And then we're going to notice how that person's a jerk, and how our kids didn't do XYZ, and how admin sucks, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
We know that negative spiral, but actually there's something called the positive spiral, where the more we notice positive things in our environment, like that tree's beautiful. I mean, I like this mug. My
Right.
socks are cozy. These are my favorite pair of socks. They sound dumb, but the more you start noticing those things, the more those emotions start building upon one another, and we start to create the neural pathways that help us feel better. And gratitude is an evidence-based intervention and strategy for good positive coping. Now, don't use it when, like, oh, I just held this child as they died. Okay, what can I be grateful for? Like, that's a little off center, right?
Right.
We've got to feel the feelings. We have to be able to hold both,
Right.
right? Which is a little bit more complicated. But starting the habit of practicing gratitude, and I know for me as a family, us as a family, we sit down to have dinner and we say, okay, what are your cherries and pits? Some people call those roses and thorns,
Right.
right? A way of connecting what went well today. What are the cherries of your day? and what were maybe not some of the not good things, right? So just starting to teach let's reflect what is going well, right?
And I
And
think
getting
that's
in that
you, man.
habit.
I love that idea. Um, I've never heard it articulated that way. And like I said, I'm learning stuff from you. So that's something I'm going to integrate in to my life that I haven't done, because I think what you just mentioned there, especially for those of us with kids, we start that process when they're young. We're
Mm-hmm.
now getting that into the mindset of a daily process of, again, finding gratitude, recognizing, okay, some things didn't go well today, but what did? Let's focus on, we can have an equal base here, not just all negative, because it is easy to find in that negative cycle. So I do love that. And just thinking from outside the perspective of not just myself, but the family, you're, unbeknownst to them, starting to teach them how to find that gratitude, how to be grateful that this world needs more of. And that's a brilliant way to go about doing that. That's pretty awesome. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, and my kids sometimes roll their eyes, but I think it'll stick eventually. And then once I got a card that said, "Mom, I appreciate how positive you are," and I was like, "Oh, I'm getting in there." Right. So, yeah, and most of us, the thing is, and especially when you think about first responder culture or firehouse culture in particular, we like there's all the gossip and the talking badly, but when we look at what that is, that's in part a reach for connection.
Hmm.
It's just connecting over noticing what's going wrong,
Yeah.
right? So if we can start practicing noticing what's going right, I don't mean we're going to sit around the fire table and say, everyone say what you're grateful for, right? That,
Right.
of course, in my perfect therapeutic world, maybe that would happen on more than just on Thanksgiving, but if we just start practicing how connecting in healthy ways and noticing, even if it's just in your own self, what can you be grateful for? Or, oh, wow, look at that sunset. Or you're taking the kids to school. Okay, kids, like, what are you guys grateful for today? Sometimes my kids can't come up with anything. And I'm like, look at how safe you are. Look how warm you are. Look how well fed you
Mm.
are. Right. And I don't try to shame them with that, but I want them to start noticing that there are little things we can be grateful for.
And we get spoiled here in America. Go to other countries, third world countries, where, they don't even have clean drinking water. How blessed you are here to turn on the
Right.
faucet and clean water
Right.
comes out. Yeah, teaching the
It's the
kids.
the starving kids in Africa
Yeah,
conversation.
yes.
I heard from my
Do you
parents growing up,
think,
like, eat your food. There's children starving. Right. So,
what about, in the fire service, when we're looking at, you talked about that negativity side of things, and a lot of the negativity comes from, I would say, intra-department stuff of when you have
mhm.
a disconnect with the upper brass from the men and women that are on the streets doing the work. How do you then, most of us, or, a lot of firemen are not paid well. That's why you got to work two and three jobs. Uh, and then you have a disconnect from the upper management that doesn't translate to that connection that you're talking about. And you know it, you can see it and can feel it by their
Mhm.
actions. How does one, you're trying to find the gratitude, maybe the equipment isn't up to par in some places because of budgetary issues, low pay, high stress, and a disconnect from management. What is your recommendation or advice for people that find themselves maybe in that kind of situation on finding gratitude within the profession?
That's a really good question, and it's a little bit complicated because you're not going to say, look at people that are not leading well and
Right.
feel gratitude, right? You're going to feel
Right.
resentment,
Yeah.
right? So, what the conversation I have a lot about is, what do you value and what is your mission, your personal mission? Why were
Mhm.
you called to this kind of career? And what is in your control? We can't control the decisions of admin or of command staff. We can't control what the city has in its budget for new trucks or staffing. So what is in your control? And let's start there. And I'm not talking about I'm never going to jump to gratitude when someone is upset about something. Like, oh,
Right.
don't worry about it. What can you be grateful for? No, because that's
Mhm.
actually quite invalidating. So, yeah, you get to be mad about XYZ happen and how maybe something's not going well in the organization or it's being led poorly. That is true. But also, if that's happening, what is your personal mission and what do you have control over? No, I really love helping people. No, I really love coaching my kids' soccer team, right? I really value what I really love that I'm a great medic and I make a difference on this one-on-one level. Right? So refocusing people to on their values, um, and not ignoring the bad stuff, but some things are simply out of our control. So we
Mhm.
have to know what we can control and what we can't, right? We can't save everybody, just like you were talking about. Um, and sometimes those situations are way over, beyond us, over our head in city politics, right? And so, what do I value, and how do I bring the best of me today to this tough situation,
Mhm.
right? Life isn't always fair, and there's a lot of bad situations out there of many different flavors. So, how do I show up and add value here rather than to contribute more chaos or more
Right.
negativity?
Yeah, I think in the way, a good way I always looked at that and was blessed with, yeah, there was no shortage of bitching about things of that
Yeah,
nature, and it was just a venting, but we always gravitated to what can you do, like you said, and that's lead by example.
yeah.
Even if you're a grunt on the back, I spent my entire career on the back of a unit. I loved it there. I like getting my hands dirty. So from there, it was like, okay, the new guys that are coming up in the department, or guys that you worked with, leading by like, hey, I got this. Come on, I'm going to help you with it. Or, maybe it's that lieutenant or captain that leads by going, hey guys, no, we're not going to sit on our rear ends today. We're going to go do a little training, better our skills. Maybe it's going out and just doing some public interaction and pub ed services, getting with those younger kids of going, hey, you're the future. I'm here now, but there's got to be somebody to take my place, and maybe I can make a difference in that younger generation. So I think do it like you said, control the things you can control within the department, and one of those things is just lead and do your job to the best of your ability. I think there's nothing worse that brings down the positivity or just the station demeanor overall than having everybody that's pissed and mad, but then they don't do anything to better themselves, their crew, or the department as a whole on what you can control. So I think, you're right there on get out there and do something. Just do something positive,
Mm-hmm.
instead of sitting, bitching, and just, I call it slug. If you're a slug and you don't do anything, then you're not really making any effort to improve that environment.
And so
So I think,
once,
like you,
yeah, sorry.
no,
One strategy as you're talking, that I've taught is something I call flashlight focus. And really it's about, I mean, kind of getting to your point is what are you focused on? If we're focused on the bad stuff that's happening, and there will always be some of
yeah,
it, right? Whether it's we didn't have enough grocery money, or we've got a bill collector, or there's a chief doing something asinine, right? Or a coworker or a kid, it doesn't matter, right? There's always going to be something negative we could focus on. But where you put your focus, if you're going to stay focused on that, you're going to get more of it. And sometimes we get fixated, like, can you believe it? And then he did this and then, right? So I think about it like, imagine you have a headlamp, and what is your headlamp shining on? Are you shining on the crap and the negativity? And so if you notice, especially in your own mindset, that you're stuck thinking about something over and over, stewing about it, about what crappy or what that person did or didn't do, literally pick up your helmet and your headlamp and shine it somewhere else, right? So that is kind of an in the moment coping. And we're not ignoring it, we're not brushing it under the rug, but focusing on the negative produces a whole bunch of negative and unpleasant emotional and physiological experiences inside of us. So if we pick up our headlamp, shine it on something else, it doesn't matter what, right? Again, it could be something as small as I'm so grateful for this cup of coffee, or I'm going to look outside because that tree is nice, right? Change your focus, or you go to a picture in your phone that of your last family vacation, or a picture of your kid that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, and you literally start shining the headlamp somewhere else. Change your focus, right? We get stuck in this kind of hamster wheel of life and of patterns of emotion. And so changing what you're looking at is one strategy. If you're also stuck, another coping strategy is move your body like right away. So if you're feeling super pissed off, or you're feeling like you're, you know, tense or anxious or depressed, those are physiological experiences. It's not just this is the way it is today. Those are, so take 5 minutes, go run up and down the stairs if you're at work. Take a walk around the block if you can. Drop and do 5 push-ups just to change your physiology and to break and interrupt the pattern of that emotion. If you're having an argument with a loved one at home and it's getting heated, literally take a time out and go take a walk or a breathing break, or play with the dog, or do something that, like, number one, switches your focus, and number two, changes your physiology. Those two things, and that's when I first started learning healthy coping strategies, those were some of the easiest and the fastest ways to change my state, right? And to change, like, okay, I'm feeling really down about this, but okay, I'm just going to put on some music and I'm going to dance it out for 5 minutes. That's my way, right? You could do 25 jumping jacks and do the same thing, right? You got to find the way that's going to change your physiology. And when you're at work, it's a little bit more tricky, right? But you can go to your room, you can go to the bathroom and blah, shake it out for a second. It's silly, but it works because
Yeah.
it changes your biology and it gets you out of that hamster wheel of a stuck feeling. That was a
How
little
does,
bit of a rabbit hole, but
I always hear too, we're giving all these options of things that can be done, but I've heard this a lot, especially in the physical fitness world of things of I don't have time.
mm-hmm.
I don't have time to do that. Common excuse we hear
Yep.
all the time, I don't have time. So how do you get somebody to overcome that myth that they don't have time for constructive ways of working on themselves and dealing with those situations?
And to most people's points, everyone is pretty freaking busy, right? So we are, many people are overscheduled. So, right, get back to like how can you
Yeah.
carve out some time? Um, really start with 5 minutes.
Hmm.
It does not need to be, I need to go to a 2 hour workout and have an hour of meditation every morning, right? Or cook a big breakfast and have this long date with my partner. It literally can be 2 to 5 minutes. Start really small, just a few deep breaths, maybe, in the car, as you're parking the car before you walk into wherever you're walking into. Okay, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths here, right? Just to reset a little bit. Or maybe I just get outside and get a breath of fresh air and I take a deep breath and look up at the sky, right? Everyone has a few minutes. It's just really about how you prioritize that time. So whether it's stretching, whether it's breathing, whether it's listening to music, whether it's prayer or meditation, or that whatever you're going to do to, or 5 minutes of jumping jacks, right? Just start really small. It doesn't need to be a huge time suck, right? Just a couple minutes starting.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, and not all stations are like this, but what I've witnessed throughout my career are the ones that I saw this migration that typically happens. And that's, if you're at a slow station, it's not busy. People will come in, fix their breakfast or lunch, check out the units, and then go to sitting behind a TV.
Mm-hmm.
and just
In the recliner with their phone while the TV's on.
and to
So
me it's
brain
like,
is like,
yeah, and I just go, instead of using that time, I was never a big TV person throughout my career. Usually other stuff going on
yeah.
that I was dealing with, but to me, it was like probably a reason why I don't watch a lot of TV at all now is because I still have that stigma or mental image of watching guys come into the station and just sit stagnant, sit, just get lost behind a TV, and you get up to eat or make a call or go to the bathroom, but they don't do anything else. And that stagnant process brings nothing positive whatsoever, I believe, to the individual or to the environment.
So what do you
It's
do?
okay to
So
have
what do
some
you do
downtime,
instead,
but
Lee? I can't imagine because every station I walk into has that setup, right? There's
and
the
it's like
recliners, there's the
it's good for the right time. It's like, hey, in the evenings, great time to do that. But during the day, I think too, having that stagnant process of we get into a habit of sitting behind a TV and vegging out and doing nothing versus let's take time that we don't have and just reprioritize what we're doing. Like you were saying, at the station, most of the time, there's no reason you can't find 30 to 60 minutes in a shift. You're there for 24 hours, and in some cases now, 48 hours. And you're telling me you can't find an hour to work on you every shift? I don't buy it. That's to me is an excuse to not do said because you can do things as one less hour of TV, maybe one less hour instead of staying up till 1, 2 in the morning. Maybe we go to bed a little earlier, and during that process of that is working on ourselves. Um, Again, there's so much time in a shift that 95% of the time it's not one that's just go, go, go until it's time to get off. Those are rare. So to me, I think too, with a fire service, we have to get out of those negative habits and use the excuse of I don't have time because that's what that is it's an excuse to not do what we know we need to do. And it's real
or you just
easy to
gotta
just,
reallocate your time. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
reallocate. It's no
watch a
different
movie,
than
play a video
in
game,
the
right?
fitness world. I don't have time to work out, and it's like, cool. How much TV time do you do at home? Well, I watch 4 hours of TV every night before I go to bed. Okay, there's your time. Or wake up earlier, wake up an hour earlier and get that workout out, and then you're done. So again, it's easy to find an excuse to not do something, but I think again comes back to prioritizing your time and
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing you and finding and making that time. And again, like you said, it doesn't have to be hours, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And exercise is the big one. So if you can figure out a way to work in that exercise into it, for me, exercise, I'm doing the physical side of things and exertion and getting all that negative stuff out, but it also makes me mentally focus on the task at hand. You're working on breathing. Again, when you're resting or stretching, add a little meditation. You can overlap so many of these things that you've talked about into one 30-minute session.
Yeah, you
So,
can.
and if you don't
And
have
the
30 minutes, sweet, ride the bike go for a 15-minute walk around the station and do the same thing. Again, it's just you have to prioritize your time and in order to prioritize yourself.
And you gotta find the things that work for you. So
Yep.
for me, meditation, dance, right?
Hmm.
Right, there's my quiet kind of time, and then there's a time where I'm moving, right? Or in the or lifting weights, right? Those are things that work for me, but there's not one right way, right? But it is about also prioritizing fun, right? In your
Hmm.
off time.
Yep.
Fun is a resilience factor. I talk about fun, and people think, especially grown-ups who have a lot of responsibilities, will think like, well, that's nice, but no, nothing's really fun anymore. But actually, where can you sprinkle in the fun? And even if you're doing the adult responsibilities, how do you even make that more fun? Oh, I'm going to throw in my favorite, I'm going to put on my favorite music while I do that chore, right? Those kinds of small baby tweaks, baby step tweaks to the life you're already living is where you start making differences. It's not about an overhaul. It's about starting small, and building from there. Once you realize, oh, I noticed when I did 5 minutes of breathing that my day went a lot smoother. Oh, maybe I want to do 10 minutes next week, right?
Right.
So really starting small, but definitely getting fun in, and not as in I'll have fun when it's hunting season 6 months from now. Um, More about how can I get a little bit of fun, and even like mini fun in today, and making some healthy decisions in that, like, oh, I'm gonna get silly with the kids, or play board game, or I don't know, go on a quick hike with the dog, something.
And I think that's become harder. I can
Yeah.
remember, I'll tell you, in my career, the funnest times. Every shift was an absolute, it was like I was excited to go to work to see the mayhem that would ensue amongst us at the station. Because back in that time period, that's what it was. It was the Boys Scout Club for 24 hours of just having fun. The mayhem that would ensue within the brother and sisterhood of that, of just that went on, it was absolutely a blast. And over my career, I saw that chipped away to where now you can't have that. Well, I can only speak for, the department I work for, but fun is will get you fired. And now, that's something that the fire
Are we
service
talking
as a,
hazing fun? What are you talking about?
well, yes, people would call it hazing, but for us, we knew that if you're not being hazed, you're not being liked. And the hazing was more of just a, can you earn it? You had to earn that. And then once you're in, it was just, I wouldn't even call it, I never looked at it as hazing. I had some absolutely horrible shit done to me. Uh, and at the end, I was like, if they're not messing with me, then they don't like me. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they're messing with me at this amount means that I'm doing something right and I'm earning my place within the tribe there at the station. And then I found as the career went on that yes, it goes away, but the way we did it, it was an understanding of it's just kind of that path you walk to get in amongst your peers. But it was so fun. I never looked at it as, oh my God, they're picking on me or they're being mean to me. I would laugh at all of them and go, that was pretty damn good. That was slick. All right, I gotta beat that now. And so it always became this little just, hey, we're gonna go have fun.
Yeah.
And we do it, but we don't do it maliciously. The way you maliciously, if you don't like somebody, is the silent treatment. You don't, they get that silent treatment, and that's a big, like, uh-oh, what am I doing wrong on that? So, for us in the public, when I tell some of the stories of stuff that we used to do, they're like, oh my God, I would have beat the shit out of somebody doing that, or I would have went to management. I was like, oh no, you wouldn't have made it then. So it's kind of that rite of passage. And so as it progressed though, nowadays we you can't do any of the stuff that we did before. It's hell, you have to be careful what you even say
Yeah.
because it's just something that you say could be interpreted wrong, and next thing you know you're fired or you're under investigation. So,
And
I
then we
think
have to
that's
use a whole
made,
bunch of other coping strategies. Yeah.
yeah. So I think part of that, I think as a fundamental process in the fire service, we've taken something that to me helped with the coping of all the negative stuff by being able to
Mm-hmm.
have so much fun at the station. And we've really, it's the word I'm looking for, sterilized it down to a process where we're
Mm-hmm.
afraid to have fun at the station because you're afraid of losing your job. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it falls upon, the higher brass all the way down to, can we find maybe a medium? I feel like we've gone from one extreme, which at times, yes, it may not have been the best for some, to
Right.
another
No,
extreme to where
there's some pretty horrible stories I've heard, and
there
um,
is absolutely
lawsuits and things that
right.
really
So
shouldn't have been occurring in that kind of umbrella of hazing.
absolutely. But now
But
the key is
I
we've
know
gone
what you
to the
mean.
other
Yeah.
extreme where there's nothing. So can we maybe just meet in the middle to bring a little bit of that environment back to have fun? So outside of that, so if we can't do some of the things we used to do, what are some other things that they can put in their tool belt to say to help reduce the stress at the station amongst your crew? What are some simple things? Because if I go up and go, hey, you want to go out and do some yoga and meditate? They're going to be like, pound sand. No,
Well,
it.
I mean,
What are
that
some
is
things you can
it
do
is a
to
good point.
incorporate the group as a whole on stress management there at the station?
For anyone who is in leadership listening to this, I think it is an important conversation to think about what habits can, especially as captains, the kind of boots on the ground
Yeah.
leadership, and for chiefs too, what kind of small habits and new routines can get into the daily life that you do have control over, right? Um, so, and the other thing I want to back up and say a little bit about coping, what we're not talking about here, which will be the focus of another episode, is coping with significant trauma. I'm not talking about when we've got post-traumatic stress symptoms. I'm not talking about coping with that, right? That's something
All right.
completely separate that we really haven't talked about here. So I just wanted to add
Right.
that little asterisks in this
Yeah.
conversation. But if you are a leader, I want you to think about how do you integrate more self-care into daily operations. So I know some departments, and I love these chiefs for doing it, that have snuck in yoga into their training, but they're not calling it yoga. They'll say, oh, we're stretching, or we're working on injury prevention. But what's
Hmm.
happening? Okay, we're moving our body. We're actually changing and affecting the nervous system and initiating that parasympathetic relaxation response by practicing some stretching and yoga situations. Now, this has to be done with the right kind of teachers who
Right.
know how to do it well and know their audience. But they have put it in as part of their daily operations or quarterly or some sort of training um, that helps with positive coping. We're giving people's bodies a break. We're helping support their physical beings, which, by the way, helps their mental well being as well. So there's that. I mean, would I love if every captain started every shift with a little bit of deep breathing and focused intention on how they're going to start their day rather than the chore and the truck checks and the vacuuming and
No.
you know, yes, I would love that, but I don't. That's maybe a few years from now. Uh, but I think the small ways you start your day of connection, of genuine connection, the small moments once the chores are done and once the truck checks are done of how you get your 5 minutes of either physical jumpy jacks, push ups, or intention setting for the day, or prayer time, or whatever that looks like for you. Those are the kind of small baby step, practical ways of breathing to eating your breakfast slowly. We haven't even talked
Yeah.
about mindful eating here.
Right.
How do most firefighters and first responders or people sitting in the ambulances or cops in cars eating? Shove and go, right? Because you don't know what's
Yeah.
happening, or you don't know how much is right. And actually, that's terrible for us. So,
Yeah.
mindful eating, basically, how do you slow down? How do you eat and enjoy your food rather than shovel because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes? So, those small type of tweaks, um, maybe every time you take a sip of your water, you think of one thing you're grateful for, right? That nobody needs to know you're doing it. You don't have to carve time out of your schedule to do it. It's just, oh, I'm going to be grateful for the safety of my children. And you take a sip, right? Small little things that nobody really ever has to know about. And if you're a leader, how can you start integrating? And these are some of the things that I consult with departments on,
Hmm.
some of these healthy behaviors and getting them into um, the daily operations.
I think something that could be done that's a lost, I think, depending where you are. I saw it degrade over my career as breaking bread as a
Yeah.
crew.
Yep.
Those, we called it a wagon, but dinner. When I came in, everybody did a dinner. I mean, the majority of stations, you had usually either took turns cooking or you had certain people designated to cook every shift, but you all sat down together and broke bread. And those were some of the best conversations and times to be had. And you talk about, usually that wasn't a negative dinner. They were usually enlightening because we're just, it's just something that naturally takes place in that bonding process of having a meal with others, to where when I left, look at what we went to, from stations that everybody slept in a dorm room to now you have your own individual bedroom. You could kind of hide in a bedroom and not, associate with people throughout the shift if you don't want to. Well, what has that done? Well, it's compartmentalized people's that interaction at the station, I feel like. So I saw where stations where you had individual bedrooms versus dorm rooms, that happening, and what's the first thing that went away was typically the wagon. The dinner is like, oh well, I'm always in my room, or I'm doing something on my own. We're not as a team in a group. You don't even have that one time throughout the day of sitting together and breaking bread, to where
Mhm.
now it's just like, oh well, everybody's doing their own thing, and I'll just eat and bring my own dinner and feed myself.
Yeah. And
um
that's fundamental connection, right? And
yes.
connection is what keeps us healthy,
Yeah.
right? We get into trouble and we start talking about rising mental health rates because we're disconnected from one another and from ourselves, right?
Yeah. So I think that dinner time is a tradition that's, I feel, has been lost. Maybe it's come back again. I hadn't been
I
in,
still
and
see it in the
I've been
departments I'm
retired.
in. There's still
That's good.
there's still dinner time.
But I definitely saw it degrade over my career, and it was one of the probably the biggest things that really
Mm-hmm.
kind of upset me or made me sad the most, is like, you're losing that fundamental time in the day to get together and have a good meal. And this is where you talk about influencing on the coping and eating, especially at the station. If you can cook, you cooking meals that are conducive to,
Mm-hmm.
again, doing the job and feeling well, and getting those nutrients and things that do the body and mind good. That's where you can actually have an influence,
Yeah.
is,
The good
by doing
fuel
that.
for your body, right?
Yes,
How to make a healthy
absolutely.
dinner. Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah. Well, you'll have to tune into our podcast on healthy eating and nutrition to learn
that's
more
right.
about what some of those choices might be.
That's right. Well, closing things up, what are some things that you want to close with on how we address, or what things people can kind of do that we maybe put it all together into some processes and baby steps?
Yeah, I know we've talked about a lot today. And what I really want to do is encourage people to pick one small baby step that sounds slightly interesting to you and realistic that you could try. Not that I'm going to start my new workout routine of 2 hours every day for the next month, right? Pick one small thing that you might try to do a little differently from this conversation and share that with someone in your life. Share it with one of your colleagues or share it with a family member, but do something, right? Nothing changes if we keep doing the things that we've always been doing. And the thing is, you're not a machine. I do not want robots showing up to my house when I call 911. I want real live, feeling, caring humans. And when we don't take care of ourselves with some of these good habits and coping strategies, we end up not being good to anyone, right? Not good to our own families and the people
Mhm.
in our own personal lives. And also, eventually, our professional work that we're bringing out to the community pays a price too. You're not good if you're running on fumes. You're not good if you're on the hamster wheel of life, just doing all the things for all the people. So you have to give yourself permission to stop and to take those 5 minutes to breathe or to be selfish in order to take care of yourself. It's what will sustain you and have a long career and get you out of survival mode. So don't get overwhelmed, right? Pick one small thing and start there. One small thing that makes sense to you, one small thing that you think, I actually might enjoy that, or that might be good for me. Maybe it's just a different food choice, right? I met
Mhm.
a firefighter yesterday who was cutting out caffeine. Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
So just do one small thing and then share it with somebody or let us know, drop us a line,
Yeah.
put a comment about one small thing you're going to start doing differently. And we'd love to hear about the challenges and the wins that you're having in your own life, making some healthier decisions.
Yeah, and if you do, if there's some people out there in upper management or individuals, and maybe they're on this on their own because they don't necessarily have that group camaraderie or backing of that, they can reach out. I mean, that you work with departments on setting up healthy
I do.
processes, correct?
I do. I do. That's what I do through our PAR 360 program is consulting with leadership and how to create healthier departments all around. Yeah.
Great. Well, awesome. Well, a lot of info today. There's a lot in there. And again, if there's somebody wanting specifics or one-on-one, down below, you can reach us at Blue Peak or the Holistic Wellness Center. Different programs for different people, but the good part is we've been doing this a long time and we've seen transitions and we understand how to kind of get that pendulum moving back. It just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and get the ball rolling, and it snowballs from there a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how if you can get one person at the station to initiate change, how all of a sudden then you'll start have this trickle effect of others. They may not incorporate all of it, but even if we can incorporate one positive change as a collective group, now collectively there's a bigger change that's taking place. So a lot of times it's that group mentality. It takes one.
And
One
we don't
person
need
has
to
to kind
wait
of.
for crisis to make a change.
That's right. Yeah, don't wait till everything's crumbling down, and
Yeah.
it's about that prevention, like you mentioned before. So,
Yeah.
all right.
All
Well,
right. Thanks,
we're going to
Lee.
end today, and we got more coming. So, anything else you want to close with?
No, I think
No.
this is enough for now.
All right. Well, everybody, y'all take care. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Holidays are coming up, and this will be released prior to Christmas. So this will hopefully give you some strategies and tips on battling the holidays because we know it's always just more stress typically added on top of everything else that we have going on. So hopefully you'll find that some information here of value. And if you need anything, please leave comments below of things that work for you, things that you've gone through, changes that have been made for the better. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. We're happy to help. So until next time, y'all take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and be safe. See you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.